Hello, welcome to another video on our channel. Here we translate testimonies of people who have had near-death experiences. Today we will learn about the story of Laura Ketcheld. She says she was clinically dead and discovered a hidden secret about the afterlife. If you are not yet subscribed to the channel, subscribe now. Activate the notification bell to be notified of each new video. Now, let's listen to Laura's testimony. Hello. My name is Laura Ketcheld. I am a writer and filmmaker, but above all, I am here today to share this experience and end the isolation and stigma that accompany it. It all started on a beautiful day when my boyfriend Terry called me and suggested we go horseback riding. I immediately agreed, and we decided to head to Centerville, where I used to take lessons. I have always been passionate about horses, and even had my own farm in Lexington, Kentucky for 15 years. I can say for sure that I love horses and riding. At the last minute, Terry canceled on me, so I decided to go alone. I went to my mother's house, grabbed my helmet and boots, and rented a horse. The day was wonderful, and the ride started smoothly. I was riding a bay horse, using an English saddle, followed the trails, and everything was going well. At a certain point, I got off the horse and looked around. I decided to return to the barn, so I went back to the horse. That's when I noticed the presence of two other riders on the trail. We started talking and joking, enjoying the beautiful day. One of the guys suggested we race back to the barn. I thought it was a great idea and decided I wanted to win. The horse took off and was much faster than I imagined. I wasn't able to control the gallop as I should. It was like watching a racehorse speeding down the track. I held on as best as I could, but it had been a while since I last rode, and I wasn't feeling at my best. And then it happened. The horse stumbled, and I knew at that moment I would be thrown to the ground. I felt that terrible fear, the sensation that something very bad was about to happen. I wasn't terrified, but I knew the situation wouldn't be good because I was going so fast. As I let go of the saddle, with my heels up, I felt an even more intense sense of dread. I was launched into the air like a missile because of the horse's speed. I was flying through the air, but I never hit the ground. At that moment, I left my physical body behind. In a matter of seconds, I left the horse and entered a dark tunnel at an impressive speed. The walls seemed soft and light, even though the darkness was deep. I could see perfectly better than ever. It was a crystal clear vision. I knew the walls were dense, but the tunnel seemed endless. I felt a roller coaster of emotions, fear of the unknown, dread, and absolute terror. I remember thinking that the feeling of isolation in outer space was something strange, but at the same time beautiful and horrible. I went through that dark tunnel until there was a small light at the end, a bright spot. Even in the middle of the darkness, I could see. And there was my grandfather, standing, waiting for me. He passed away when I was 12, a victim of a terrible cancer. He was the most wonderful person in the world, and my hero. It's very difficult to talk about this without crying even today because it's an emotional experience. When I saw him, he wasn't younger. It was as if I were 5 years old, and he was healthy in his 60s. That's how he looked, and how he was treated similarly, and he was there. You know how my collect saves lives in the ocean, you know. So I reunited with him. It was very emotional. He said some things that were very personal, that I really don't mind sharing. And I realized when I saw him that he should be dead now. That was very unpleasant. I knew that, oh my God, I just started living. I had my own apartment and money in the bank and wallet and a bright future. I was so involved in life, going to shows and being a teenager. And I can say this now, I was a pretty girl and loved the attention I received. Now, at 60, I'm with my grandfather and I know I'm dead. Part of me is happy to see him, but the other part is afraid that it's all over. I never really got to live, you know. It's like a big missed opportunity that you just stole. My own stupidity of racing with a horse. I can't blame anyone, not the horse. I can blame myself, and over time I've talked about this accident. The horse wasn't hurt, folks. The horse was fine. It was me who died. That's very intense. and then someone was guiding me from behind. I'm going to leave my grandfather, but he didn't come with me. Things happened, things that were very disturbing. I had what you call a life review, but it's not like, flipping through a holodeck. All the scenes of your life, it's the effect you had on others, and you are your own judge. So this is not a heaven or hell thing. I never had a religious epiphany when I died. I'm Presbyterian, raised Presbyterian, but I didn't have a religious epiphany. So I went through a review of this life, and it was very brutal. I was 19. I did a lot of selfish things, like a child. When you're a child, you think the world revolves around you. You don't think about others enough. And I can see some of the things I did. I knew it was rude or unpleasant. Not rude, but cruel, to a little 6-year-old girl. I was 6 at the time. It was because of her doll. We both got the same doll for Christmas. And I said something sharp. I felt how she felt, that a trusted friend had carelessly hit her. Because I was 6, it was premeditated. And I felt her pain, and saw the actions. I took the effects. I was feeling it from the other person's point of view. But you can see them at the same time. It's like a double thing. I don't know how it works. It's strange. The laws of physics are very different in non-physical reality compared to our planet Earth. So I had to go through these things I saw. Some good things I did, like rescuing a kitten running in traffic when I was about 18. And almost died doing it. A boy I helped at school. I saw some good things I did. But I was also unpleasant to my mother. Said smart things to her. And I felt the pain of it from her point of view. So, it's all right. I went through the life review, saw my actions. I don't feel proud, but I wasn't a serial killer or hurt pets or anything like that. But still, I could feel the impact and was really surprised by the little things. The impact you can have on someone else's life. And I also learned a lesson from doing it. A realization that if I ever came back, I would try not to harm anyone else. And I really understood that the worst thing you can do is not ruin your own life, but interfere with someone else's destiny. Interrupt someone else's destiny. So part of me had this realization. Understanding a new perspective. You really destroy someone's life. You feel every ounce, every bit when you die, and go through the actions through your vision. So let's say you're a horrible politician and want to start a war to prove a political point, just hypothetically. And you send young men and women to their deaths, all right. This happens every day in the world. When that politician dies and meets their natural fate, they will see every life they affected and feel the pain, anguish, and suffering. So I imagine that would be a fair definition of a hellish experience. If you're a bad person and ruin people's lives, took their destinies and things like that. So, I have this perspective and I'm kind of verbose about it because I think it was a very emotional thing for a 19-year-old to understand. Now, at 63, maybe I can have a better understanding of it. Wow. It's a big thing for a 19-year-old to find out. And I was never a good student, so I had this experience. And there was no punishment or anything like that. There was an understanding. There was no reckoning. And then we followed this journey. I found myself wrapped in this feeling in my solar plexus, being pulled and dragged forward, towards the next thing. And this part was cool because it was a big rush. Traveling or moving across distances, or passing through layers, or whatever we call other dimensions. It was very exciting, amazing. It was like a happy feeling, a big thrill, and I reached what they call, or I call, the source. So I didn't see God. I didn't know if it was Jesus visiting me or anything like that, but I was quickly taken to this place. It was like being contained, huge, but at the same time contained like a cloud. My mind was trying to understand and comprehend where I was orienting myself, and I didn't feel my physical body. I felt transformed into a point of consciousness. At least, that's the best way I can describe it. At that time, I didn't know I was a point of consciousness. It was only years later, through flashbacks of near-death experiences, that I kind of discovered this. It was like floating in a sea of love and happiness. I didn't want to leave there. I don't regret being wrapped in love instead of just floating through that cloud-like place. And then you went through the clouds and there was a bright light. But it didn't hurt your eyes. But there was no sun. There was classical music I had never heard in my life here on Earth, with different instruments floating like random waves, as if they were being caressed by the music. Before continuing, just a request. Subscribe to the channel. Before we continue, just one request. Please subscribe to our channel. It really helps us keep going. This helps us a lot to continue. So I was floating in the sea of love, thinking about what surrounded me. I felt cradled by that immense place, and I didn't know exactly what it was. All I knew was that I was happy to be there. Thinking about it now, at 63 years old, I call it a source. Other people might very well say they went to heaven or something like that. But I believe it's my origin, and the souls around me were like the cradles of my consciousness, or my body, or whatever you want to call it. It's as if the smaller I was, the more Catholic I felt. I could recognize these souls. It was much more than I'm expressing. There are no words, no feeling of happiness like that, but the feeling that I didn't want to have regrets. I was in the moment, floating in a sea of love. I didn't know something like that could happen. I mean, looking back, you know. And I'm not thinking about biblical references, because in fact I moved away from religion when I was having this near-death experience. Thank God, now I'm at peace with it. I hear an exodus, and then I come back. I'm approaching physical reality, but not so close, because that bliss was as far as I got. I felt like I was reaching the limit of my strength. I'm being guided. Someone is behind me, and I can hear whispers, but I can't identify who it is. And there's a beautiful cathedral in front of me, but I can't distinguish the ground. There must be a ground, but I don't see it. So I move forward and look to the right, and I see something in the distance that looked almost like a cartoon scene, but something you would see in a science fiction movie. It looked like planet Earth, and I thought to myself, oh God, I hate heights. Why does this have to happen? I hate the feeling of vertigo, but I didn't panic. I calmed down. It really was Earth. At least my mind was perceiving it. I actually don't know. There's much more to non-physical reality that I don't believe the brain is capable of understanding. So I move forward in this cathedral guided. I actually had no choice in the matter. And then, what is explained to me telepathically as information is that this is a place where my past lives are stored. I wasn't a big believer. I mean, I never heard much about reincarnation. Maybe a few times when I was a child, but I never thought much about past lives. And there they were, lined up like in a closet, a whole row of males and another of females. The bodies were still, and were white, as if they were statues. So I had a body and an arm, and I went to touch one of them. It was a middle-aged man, with a belly, not very handsome, white hair and Caucasian, and I was horrified just at the idea of being a man, because I'm a very feminine woman. It was really scary. And I found on the other side a woman who looked somewhat grumpy, as if I was bothering her. Then I realized that throughout life I was the victim. I was the follower, the leader, the villain, playing many roles every day. And you know what my first thought was? Well, don't make me exactly. I had to go back and do it repeatedly. I thought, God, I was terrible at school. I must be very bad at learning my lessons or something. I've been through this many times. I just don't really want to do it again. But the lesson that was shown to me is about all my past lives. And this is the life as Laura Catholic that I became aware of. So I did it differently from the others. I became aware. I didn't like the feeling. I didn't feel good about it. I was accepting, but I didn't feel connected or had any psychic connection with any of these past lives, whatever it is. Then I understand that big subject, that big pull, and I'm being pulled back. So I'm standing on a beach, which is cool, because I think it was common from the heavens or consensual realities you can follow when you die. Because there are many, many choices in the next life, which surprised me. But there I'm standing on the beach, and the sea is coming close. I grew up in a literary city, so it's very familiar and pleasant. I'm looking at the sand, which is beautiful and lovely, and the water is clear and simply heavenly. It's not really heavenly, but it's beautiful. Then look at these rocks, these cliff rocks, and the windows carved with glass panels. I realize that people are living in them as if they were houses in these rocks. I'm thinking this is amazing. And then I started thinking about religion, because, my other grandfather was a minister. This echoed in us, and I thought, damn, there was never a tree of life. And then, right next to the surf, about 6 feet in the ocean, this beautiful pine tree emerges. When I thought of the tree of life, it appeared. So this dimension or this layer I was in was very sensitive to thought. I created this with my thoughts. I'm thinking. I'm not sure. It's just a hypothesis. I went to the tree and its bark was beautiful. It was a tall pine and looked white, but it also had a moss-green hue on some of the edges. It was so beautiful and had an amazing texture. I was just admiring this beautiful tree and thought, it's right in the ocean. How crazy. How is this possible? As soon as I relaxed, the whole class was over and I was pulled back. I felt angry because I couldn't stay, explore and see if I found someone. I wondered if there were dogs there and if there were horses on the beach. I wanted to stay in that place and see what it was about. Then back, and I'm very close to physical reality with my grandfather. I'm starting to understand things as if everything is clicking in my head and I have a broader understanding. No one told me, oh, you have to go back. It's like I'm going back, returning. And I wanted to hold my grandfather's hand and stay there. But I realized I had to go back. I held my grandfather's hand and started to be twisted. And that wasn't good. I realized I was no longer with him, or in all those good places. I wasn't being guided, I was being kidnapped. And then when I returned to my physical body, it was like a thought, an impulse hit me, and I didn't feel well. Suddenly, pain, 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 pain. I was very hurt, opened my eyes, looked around and knew I was back in Centerville, Virginia, on this horse farm. Saw a horse in the distance and people in the field. They brought a car to pick me up, so that was a long time ago, and something else I said to my grandfather before leaving. This whole situation has been so long, and while I was returning, many things were taken away. A lot of information and understanding. And many things were lost when I came back. So I'm looking around, watching these people, and I don't feel grateful, thankful, or very well. I'm deeply disturbed and thought to myself that this is not physical. It's not real. This is not reality. It's just the physical world. It's not the true reality. It was a shock to me, because I was just a child, and there was no guide or lecture on how I should feel. So, I was alone, feeling so lonely in this world, without my grandfather, without those souls that wrapped me in a blanket of love. It was a great disappointment, and I ran to the hospital fainting in the car. How would I go to the hospital? I went there and tried to tell the doctor, but he asked me what medications I had taken. Then he argued with my mother, who worked as a nurse there. She said, "My daughter doesn't use drugs." And it's true, I didn't use them. The doctor was so disdainful, it was a terrible experience. On the way back home, my mother was taking me to her house, and I tried to get out of the car in the middle of the intersection because I felt a terrible urgency. I needed to tell some people that I loved them. I had this urgency, and it was horrible. I got to my mother's house, and she had to examine me. I had a broken finger and nose. I was really hurt and confused. I went up to my old room, sat on the bed and cried without being able to tell anyone. I tried to tell the doctor, but it was terrible. It was the worst isolation I've ever felt. A few weeks later, I got the courage and went to a therapist, thinking she could help me understand what had happened to me. I explained to her that I had hallucinations. But she just said, "Jeans, we're not having a pity party because you broke your nose. You're used to being the pretty girl." She started being condescending. And let me say, she was a spinster who never had a date on a Saturday night. She was a fool. She embarrassed me along with that doctor. I really repressed my emotions. There was no one to talk to about it. No book in the library that I knew of. There was no outlet, and I ended up developing insomnia. I couldn't sleep. This whole situation was consuming me. I had flashbacks, and it was hard, very hard. Oh, it seems you faced some difficulties after. Well, it wasn't a romantic version of the near-death experience that some people know, but it changed everything for me. My core value changed. I know what happens after you die, or have a glimpse of the afterlife. Therefore, the afterlife is not a belief, it's a knowledge. It completely changed the way I thought about everything. It changed everything for me. But later, I shared this with my late sister, my grandmother, and eventually, my mother. It was like having a pot with the lid closed for years. You know this tendency, and I had this desire to write books. I wrote about near-death experiences, and all kinds of things, because I needed to get it out. But I didn't want to talk about it until I talked to a publisher. They said, "Damn, your whole book series is about near-death experiences. Where did you get your information from?" I said, "Well, I am one. But I realized that no one would buy my books if I didn't confess and say, hey, listen, this is my truth. This is what happened to me. You can believe me or not, but in 100 years, when we are both dead, I'll say I told you so from the other side, if you don't know." Finally, after 50 years, I got the courage to talk about it, and it has been very cathartic. I feel blessed to have returned without serious injuries, as it could have been much worse. I feel very grateful for this accident because it awakened me to the awareness that I will see my deceased loved ones again, that we will reunite. And they still have love for me as intense as when they were alive. And I tell you that the love on the other side is even deeper than the love here. Yes, everyone just moves from this life to the other. That's right. Yes, I hate to think if you really were a loving person. I believe it's not all that is known about you, a ray of sunshine and happiness, when you die. I believe it amounts to the whole life you led. I find that very important. If you have been a fairly decent person, or maybe a grumpy person, but who doesn't harm anyone, you'll be fine. I hate to think about what happens to a criminal who hurt innocent people or just a mean individual. I'm no one special and certainly made mistakes after my near-death experience. Huge mistakes in my life didn't make me a better person. No, I became more aware, but I still have my weaknesses. I lose my patience and curse too, often. That doesn't make you a saint, but it gives you a greater understanding. The only thing I tell people is that it matters a lot if you have an open heart, if you have a loving heart. Don't be too nice, and don't hold hands, and sing with kumbaya. That's very American, a phrase, eh? It's none of that. It's just the ability to love, and the intensity of love is very exciting. I would like to tell some friends who have lost loved ones that their loved ones are no longer in pain. They are in a better place. A better place than we are. You just have to live your best life until you get there. I mean, there are no shortcuts. I wished it would make me a wise person who could act perfectly all the time. Certainly not. I'm as human as anyone else. But sometimes I know people, and it's harder for me. Harder to connect with other people than before. Because when you have a near-death experience, you lose interest. You want enough money to be able to live and have some nice toys. But the idea of like sometimes greed, is someone's god, doesn't exist. You have a near-death experience, social climbing, greed, and a bunch of stupid things people get stuck on in this world. It's so meaningless. And you see how meaningless it is. Like I wanted to pass it on. I had a friend who was obsessed with, getting more stuff, more money. And I just wanted to shake her and say, hey, that's not what has value. That won't make you happy, and you won't take it with you. Enjoy your life now. Buy nice clothes. Have fun, but don't fall into the traps. I think many people have these traps. When my mother was dying, she had stage 4 cancer. And I took care of her around the clock for a long time, and we couldn't save her. It was tragic. Only. Having the near-death experience didn't help me, but it helped her. Because I could share and I could tell my mother that her father will be there. He was there for me. Your father will be there to help you in this transition. And I know it made her feel better. Because we talked about it. So it was a gift I could share with my mother. In that sense, the experience had a very positive impact. So what did you think of this incredible story? Leave your opinions in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Consider supporting our work by making a donation of any amount. The Pix key is in the video description. Let's bring hope to more people that there is life beyond what the eyes can see.